Let me ask you something. Have you ever worked hard, stayed busy, did everything you were told was right, and still felt like money just keeps slipping through your fingers? Like no matter how much effort you put in, you're running on a treadmill that never moves forward. This isn't about hustle. It isn't about luck. And it definitely isn't about intelligence. It's about something far more dangerous because it's invisible. Today we're going to talk about a mental habit that doesn't shout, doesn't warn you, and doesn't feel negative at all, yet it quietly controls your income, your choices, and your future. If you've ever felt stuck financially and couldn't explain why, stay with me until the end, because what you're about to hear might be uncomfortable, but it could also be the moment everything finally starts to change. Most people don't realize that the financial reality they live in today is largely built from beliefs they never consciously chose. From childhood, ideas about money are absorbed silently through parents' conversations. Family stress, social class, culture, and early experiences. Statements like money is hard to earn, rich people are greedy, we're not those kinds of people, or play it safe sink into the subconscious long before logic develops. These beliefs become internal rules, and once accepted, they quietly guide decisions without being questioned. When someone grows up seeing money associated with fear, arguments, or scarcity, the mind links wealth with danger or instability. Later in life, even when opportunities appear, the brain automatically rejects them, not because they're bad opportunities, but because they violate an old internal rule. The person believes they are being rational, when in reality they are obeying a belief system installed years ago. This is how unquestioned beliefs become invisible barriers. They shape how much risk feels acceptable, what level of income feels normal, and even what kind of success feels deserved. A person may say they want more money, but if their internal belief equates wealth with stress, loss, or moral compromise, unconsciously resist opportunities that could improve their situation. When a chance to earn more, learn a new skill, or step into a higher level appears, the internal response is often anxiety rather than excitement. The mind starts generating reasons to stay put. Now isn't the right time, it's too risky, I'm not ready yet, I'll do it later. These thoughts aren't laziness or lack of ambition, they are protective mechanisms. The brain is trying to keep the person inside a zone it understands, even if that zone is limiting. Over time, this creates a deep attachment to familiar struggle. People begin to structure their lives around survival habits rather than growth habits. They budget just enough to get through the month instead of planning for years ahead. They focus on avoiding loss instead of creating value. Even complaining about money becomes a strange form of comfort because it reinforces a known identity and shared experience with others in the same situation. Breaking out of this pattern feels threatening because it requires abandoning an old version of self that the mind has learned to defend. Success demands new behaviors, new thinking, and new emotional tolerance, all of which disrupt the internal sense of normal. Without realizing it, many people choose familiar pain over unfamiliar progress again and again. This is why motivation alone rarely changes financial outcomes. Until the mind stops equating struggle with safety and growth with danger, it will continuously pull a person back to what feels normal. The comfort with familiar struggle doesn't announce itself loudly. It quietly shapes daily decisions, limits ambition, and keeps potential locked behind the illusion that staying the same is safer than becoming more. Short-term thinking is one of the most subtle ways people sabotage their financial future because it disguises itself as practicality. The human brain is wired to prioritize immediate comfort and relief over distant rewards. A trait that once helped with survival but now works against long-term freedom. When faced with a choice between something that feels good now and something that pays off later, the mind naturally leans toward the present moment. This shows up in everyday behaviors like choosing entertainment over education, convenience over discipline, and spending over investing. None of these decisions feel destructive on their own, but repeated daily, they compound into long-term limitation. People often say they want financial independence, yet their actions are optimized for today's stress reduction rather than tomorrow's stability. They chase small pleasures because those pleasures offer instant emotional payoff, especially when life already feels heavy. Long-term planning requires delayed gratification, patience, and the ability to tolerate discomfort without immediate validation, which many people are never trained to develop. As a result, future goals remain abstract ideas while present desires feel urgent and real. The mind also tends to underestimate how powerful time is. 10 minutes of learning a skill doesn't feel meaningful, and saving a small amount of money seems pointless, so the brain dismisses these actions as insignificant. But wealth is rarely created through dramatic leaps. It is built through consistent, boring, long-term behaviors that don't trigger excitement. Short-term thinking also narrows perspective. When someone is focused only on getting through the week or the month, they make decisions that solve temporary problems but create permanent ones. They may take on debt for quick relief, avoid risks that could lead to growth, or stay in environments that drain them because change feels too slow. This mindset creates a cycle where life becomes a series of reactions instead of intentional moves. Long-term freedom requires imagining a version of life that doesn't yet exist and behaving in alignment with that vision long before results appear. For many, this feels unnatural and even unrealistic because there is no immediate proof that the effort is working. Without visible progress, the brain loses interest and pulls attention back to short-term rewards. Over time, this habit shapes identity, turning people into reactors rather than builders. The tragedy is that long-term success is often abandoned not because it is impossible, but because it demands patience in a world addicted to instant gratification. The habit of blaming external forces is one of the most comfortable mental positions a person can take because it removes the emotional weight of responsibility. When someone believes their financial situation is entirely caused by the system, the economy, their upbringing, bad luck, or other people, it creates a story where they are powerless but also protected from self-examination. This narrative feels justified, especially when real obstacles exist, but over time it quietly erodes personal agency. The mind begins to look outward for explanations instead of inward for solutions. Every setback becomes proof that success was never possible in the first place, reinforcing the belief that effort is pointless. This way of thinking offers short-term emotional relief because it shields the ego from failure and disappointment. If nothing is your fault, then nothing you do wrong needs to be confronted. The danger is that this relief comes at the cost of control. Without responsibility, there is no leverage for change. Even small actions lose meaning because the outcome is believed to be predetermined by forces beyond reach. People caught in this pattern often talk about what should change in the world rather than what they can change in themselves. They wait for better conditions, fairer systems, or external validation before taking action. Meanwhile, time passes. Blame also narrows perception. When the mind is focused on injustice or unfairness, it becomes blind to opportunities that exist within those same conditions. Others may succeed in similar circumstances, but their success is dismissed as privilege or luck rather than studied for patterns and lessons. This reinforces the victim narrative and keeps the person psychologically separate from possibility. Over time, this mindset hardens into identity. A person begins to see themselves as someone to whom things happen rather than someone who makes things happen. This identity influences tone, posture, energy, and decision-making, all of which affect how others respond and what opportunities arise. Responsibility does not mean denying reality or ignoring obstacles. It means recognizing that no matter how unfair the situation is, the response to it still belongs to the individual. Without that ownership, growth becomes impossible because change requires the belief that one's actions matter. Victim narratives feel safe, familiar, and morally justified, but they quietly keep people stuck by convincing them that the power to move forward lies somewhere else. Fear rarely presents itself honestly. Instead of saying, "I'm afraid," it often disguises itself as logic, caution, or intelligence. The mind creates convincing arguments that sound reasonable on the surface, but are actually designed to avoid discomfort. Thoughts like "it's not the right time," "I need more information," "I should wait until I'm more prepared," or "that probably won't work anyway" appear responsible, but underneath them is the fear of failure, rejection, or loss of control. Because these thoughts sound rational, they go unquestioned and are even praised as maturity or realism. This makes fear incredibly effective at stopping progress because it doesn't feel like fear at all. It feels like good judgment. When someone considers taking a step toward financial growth, whether it's learning a new skill, starting a business, changing careers, or investing in themselves, the brain immediately scans for potential threats. It exaggerates worst-case scenarios and minimizes potential upside, all while presenting the conclusion as logical analysis. The emotional discomfort associated with uncertainty is reframed as smart caution. Over time, this pattern trains the person to associate ambition with danger and inaction with wisdom. They begin to trust the voice that tells them to stay where they are, even if where they are is unfulfilling. This habit becomes self-reinforcing. Every time a person avoids a risk and nothing terrible happens, the mind interprets that as proof that avoidance was the correct choice. What the mind fails to recognize is the invisible cost of inaction, lost time, missed growth, and unrealized potential. Fear dressed as logic also prevents learning. Mistakes are necessary feedback, but when fear is in control, mistakes are viewed as permanent damage rather than temporary data. This leads to over-planning, endless preparation, and analysis without execution. People convince themselves they are being patient, when in reality they are stalling. The longer this continues, the stronger the mental barrier becomes. Eventually, the person stops seeing themselves as someone capable of taking bold steps and starts identifying as someone who plays it safe. This identity then shapes future decisions automatically. The mind believes it is protecting the individual, but in truth it is preserving a small, controlled life at the expense of growth. By masking fear as reason, the brain keeps people trapped in patterns that feel sensible but lead nowhere. Identity plays a far greater role in financial outcomes than most people realize, because the mind is constantly trying to stay consistent with who it believes it is. When someone has lived at a certain income level for years, that level becomes part of their self-image. They don't just earn that amount, they see themselves as the kind of person who earns that amount. Anything that challenges this identity creates internal tension. Opportunities that could significantly increase income can feel uncomfortable, intimidating, or even wrong, not because they are bad opportunities, but because they conflict with the existing self-concept. The mind interprets this conflict as a threat, and its instinctive response is to restore balance by rejecting the change. This is why people often self-sabotage right before a breakthrough. They procrastinate, make careless decisions, or talk themselves out of action just as things begin to shift. Deep down, success feels unfamiliar, and unfamiliar feels unsafe. Many people also tie their financial identity to their social environment. Earning more may create distance from family, friends, or cultural norms. And the fear of standing out or being judged can be stronger than the desire for growth. The mind equates belonging with safety, so it resists changes that might disrupt relationships or alter how others perceive them. In this way, staying at a lower income level can feel like loyalty, humility, or staying true to one's roots. Over time, these emotional attachments become invisible rules about what is acceptable or appropriate to want. Even when someone consciously sets higher goals, their behavior often contradicts those goals because the underlying identity has not shifted. They may underprice their work, avoid leadership roles, or feel undeserving of better opportunities. The mind is always working to prove itself right, so it looks for evidence that supports the existing identity and ignores evidence that challenges it. Breaking out of this pattern requires more than motivation or information. It requires a deliberate redefinition of self. Until a person begins to see themselves as capable of operating at a higher level, earning more will feel like an accident rather than a natural outcome. Identity acts as a thermostat for income, pulling results back to what feels normal. Without changing that internal setting, financial growth struggles to stick, regardless of effort or opportunity. If there's one thing to take away this message, it's this. Staying broke is rarely about money itself. It's about patterns of thinking that run quietly in the background of your life, shaping decisions before you even realize a choice was made. Unquestioned beliefs, comfort with familiar struggle, short-term thinking, victim narratives, fear disguised as logic, and identities tied to income levels all work together to keep people exactly where they are. None of these habits feel destructive on their own. In fact, most of them feel reasonable, responsible, and even smart. That's why they're so powerful. The moment real change begins is not when more money shows up, but when awareness does. When you start questioning the thoughts you've always trusted, when you stop confusing comfort with safety, when you trade instant relief for long-term freedom, and when you take responsibility for your response, no matter how unfair the situation feels, something shifts. Growth becomes possible. Opportunity becomes visible. And discipline starts to replace excuses. Wealth is not built by waiting to feel ready. It's built by acting differently before certainty arrives. Once you change the way you see yourself, your actions naturally follow, and your results have no choice but to catch up. I want to say thank you for giving your time and attention to this message, because time is the one thing you never get back. If something you heard today challenged you, That's a good sign. It means growth is knocking. I wish you the courage to question old beliefs, the patience to play the long game, and the discipline to keep going even when no one is watching. Good luck on your journey forward, and remember, the moment you change your thinking is the moment your future starts changing too.